right, so today is Wednesday, directly following the vice presidential debate between Vance and Walz. And I'm just going to start off by saying I think Vance did absolutely fantastic, better than anyone in my lifetime probably ever will, definitely ever has. That's saying a lot, considering I think expectations were really high on Vance because of how much people knew about him. You know, the general consensus around the fact that everyone knew he was intelligent, he was quick on his feet, but I think he even did that to a standard that I wasn't expecting, that general public probably was not expecting. My wife, for example, I think after the first or second question, she had already made the statement, yeah, you're right, he is very, very intelligent, and he is very clear and concise with what he says. He's articulate. Again, these were all expectations of Vance going into the thing, but I don't think anyone really expected how well he was going to actually do. Anyways, starting right off, his first answer, which I think is what probably a lot of people were going to see. Obviously, a lot of people were maybe tuning in for the first hour and the last 30 minutes they weren't going to really look at. So, you know, the people who aren't very politically active would just pop in for at least maybe like until the first break, which I think was about 50 minutes in. They would definitely watch that first hour or so. And I think Vance's first answer could have so heartily won him the debate. I think the general public, even the people who are not politically active, will listen to his first answer, get everything that they need to know. Vance's first answer, he put aside the actual question for a second, and the very first thing he did was describe himself. And he described himself in a way that's palatable for the general public to get them to understand that he's probably a lot more like them than he is a politician. He's a father. He's living the American dream. He came up from nothing. And he did that for about 1 minute and 30 seconds out of his 2-minute allotted time. And then proceeded to answer the question. In, a couple of seconds, he answered it in a couple of phrases, and he was done. And I think that's a stark contrast compared to what we've seen from Harris and Walz. And I think that the public will recognize that. I've gone through and I've gathered a couple of clips from the debate that I think are noteworthy achievements, how well Vance performed. All right, so this first clip I'm going to show is it's kind of a Freudian slip by Walz, and again, this just goes to show how unprepared and uncomfortable he was, even at the beginning of the debate. It didn't matter. It didn't matter how much he prepared. He was uncomfortable, had no idea how to answer. So this first gaffe was a Freudian slip, and they were talking about immigration and the border. What he was trying to say was, look, all of us, Democrats, Republicans, want this thing solved. But then he corrected himself. He says, look, all of us, most of us want this solved. It's a little bit of a Freudian slip there, Walz.
Who prosecuted transnational gangs for human trafficking and drug interventions. But look, we all want to solve this. Most of us want to solve this, and that is the United States Congress. That's the Border Patrol agents. That's the Chamber of Commerce. That's most Americans out here. That's why we had the fairest and the toughest bill on immigration that this nation's seen.
All right, so you're going even further on the border issue. The question was whether, talking about separating families from each other after they've illegally migrated from the southern border. CBS proceeds to try and fact check Vance, and when they did it, he called him out on it. He's like, no. The rules were you were not going to fact check, and here you are. He called him out on it, and he was very stern about it, and they didn't shut him up. They didn't turn off his mic, and that was probably their own downfall. He not only, again, much like the ABC debate, not only was Vance, debating Walz, he was also debating the moderators. And in this point, he actually shows you can win. And I think he did.
It's supported by the people who do it, and it lets us keep our dignity about how we treat other people.
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status. Right. Temporary protected status.
Well, Margaret, but
thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important because
we're going to turn out of the economy. Thank you,
Margaret. The rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP One app, where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That is the facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret, by our own
leadership. Thank you, Senator, for describing the legal process. We have so much to get to, Senator.
Those laws have been on the books since 1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The CBP-1 app has not been on the books since 1990. It's something that Kamala Harris created, Margaret.
Gentlemen, the audience can't hear you because your mics are cut. We have so much we want to get to. Thank you for explaining the legal process. Nora.
Thank you, Margaret.
So that's where we're at. Pass the bill. She'll sign it.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, the question was, will you separate parents from their children, even if their kids are U.S. citizens? You have 1 minute.
Margaret, my point is that we already have massive child separations thanks to Kamala Harris's open border. And I didn't accuse Kamala Harris of inviting drug mules. I said that she enabled the Mexican drug cartels to operate freely in this country. And we know that they use children as drug mules. And it is a disgrace, and it has to stop.
Then Vance called out Harris on the whole issue with trying to take care of the middle class. And he did it in such a light that I think is very understanding for most people. It's the best way to put it. He says, look, she's talking about all this. Why can't she enact it now? She's sitting vice president. And if she wants to enact all this change for the middle class, why doesn't she now? Why now when, she's asking for a promotion? That's the best way to put it. When she's asking for a promotion, that's all she's asking for.
And what she's actually done instead is drive the cost of food higher by 25%, drive the cost of housing higher by about 60%. Open the American southern border and make middle-class life unaffordable for a large number of Americans. If Kamala Harris has such great plans for how to address middle-class problems, then she ought to do them now. Not when asking for a promotion, but in the job the American people gave her 3.5 years ago. And the fact that she isn't tells you a lot about how much you can trust her actual plans. Now, Donald Trump's economic plan is not just a plan, but it's also a record.
And then when Walz was pressed about guns, and Vance painted it in the light of, look, we've got a mental health crisis. It's not a guns problem. It's a mental health crisis. It's a violent crime crisis. And you're letting all these violent criminals in, and we have a society that is very mentally unhealthy for the first time in American history. I mean, most people are depressed or on medicine. Well, then Walz couldn't come up with an answer because, he has to say what his actual position is. Because what else is it other than it's just the guns? It's just the guns.
We have and we should look at all of the issues, making sure folks have health care and all that, but I want to be very careful. This idea of stigmatizing mental health, just because you have a mental health issue doesn't mean you're violent. And I think what we end up doing is we start looking for a scapegoat. Sometimes it just is the guns. It's just the guns. And there are things that you can do about it. But I do think that this is one, and I think this is a healthy conversation. I think there's a capacity to find solutions on this that work, protect Second Amendment, protect our children. That's our priority.
Gentlemen, thank you. Margaret?
Then Vance pressed Walz as to why Walz has signed in his own state a law stating that if abortion fails, late-term abortion fails, and that's a little baby sitting on that table, that doctors don't have to provide medical care to that child, which basically is saying that they can just let the child die. It's a kid. He pressed him about it, and he didn't answer.
But these two things to try and say that we're pro-children, but we don't like this, or you guys are pro-abortion, that's not the case at all. We are pro-freedoms for women to make their choices, and we're going, and Kamala Harris is making the case, to make options for children more affordable, a $6,000 child tax credit, but we're not going to base that on the backs of making someone like Amber Thurman drive 600 miles to try and get health care.
Senator?
May I respond to that? First of all, Governor, I agree with you. Amber Thurman should still be alive, and there are a lot of people who should still be alive, and I certainly wish that she was. And maybe you're free to disagree with me on this and explain this to me, but as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. That is, I think, whether you're pro-choice or pro-abortion, that is fundamentally barbaric. And that's why I use that word, Nora, is because some of what we've seen, do you want to force Catholic hospitals to perform abortions against their will? Because Kamala Harris has supported suing Catholic nuns to violate their freedom of conscience. We can be a big and diverse country where we respect people's freedom of conscience and make the country more pro-baby and pro-family. But please.
Yes, Governor, please respond.
Look, this is one where there's always something there. This is a very simple proposition. These are women's decisions to make about their healthcare decisions, and the physicians who know best when they need to do this. Trying to distort the way a law is written to try and make a point, that's not it at all.
What was I wrong about, Governor? Please tell me, what was I wrong about?
That is not the way the law...
And then he had that really awkward moment where they asked him to specify why he said he was in China when Tiananmen Square happened, and he couldn't really explain why he misspoke, but that's always his excuse, is he, quote, misspoke.
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the discrepancy?
All I said on this was I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just, that's what I've said. So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Thank you, Governor.
Well, then there was that awkward moment where, you know, Walz kind of misspoke, and he said he's become friends with school shooters. I know what he was trying to say was he's become, you know, close with families or victims of school shooters, but you can't just kind of misspeak like that. There's no reason to. The way he was speaking, the sentence he was trying to create, there's no reason it should have come to that. But here's that.
I think there's a whole host of things that we can do here, but I do think at our schools we've got to talk about more security.
Senator, thank you. Governor, you previously opposed an assault weapons ban, but it's only later in your political career did you change your position. Why?
Yeah, I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA, I was an NRA guy for a long time. They used to teach gun safety. I'm of an age where my shotgun was in my car so I could pheasant hunt after football practice. That's not where we live today.
Oh, and don't forget the couple of times where Vance did this.
Work states made it more difficult. We had companies that were willing to ship it over, and we saw people profit. Folks that are venture capital in some cases, putting money into companies that were overseas. We're dehumanizing people and telling him what he was going to do. As far as the deportation plan, at one point,
you know, he looked at the camera and because he knew he was about to corner Walz. Don't forget about those. He knew what he was doing. The man's as much of an actor as Trump is at this point, and I love it. I'm all for it. Look, I think Vance did absolutely fantastic. He made all of his points very clear. He got to his answers. He didn't avoid them. Walz openly avoided questions several times. Again, going back to the whole Tiananmen Square issue, going back to the abortion issue. Vance pressed him on it. He couldn't give an answer, and when he did, it was a non-answer. Is exactly what it was. Guys, this is not rocket science. Just look with your own two eyes. Trump may not be palatable for a lot of people, okay? He's got a fiery attitude. I get it. But the reason why he chose Vance, and again, this goes back to my video with what my opinion was on the pick. The reason why he chose Vance was to pull Vance up into a national light to give the kid a chance. And when I say a kid, obviously, I'm a kid. He is a grown-ass man. But in politics, you know, relatively speaking, 40 is young. I mean, JFK was elected at 43, and he's the youngest that was ever technically elected. Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about if I think the vice presidential debate is actually going to tip the scales, I think the fact that the media is saying that it's not going to means it probably will. Walz is supposed to be the more palatable of the Walz-Harris ticket, and last night he was not very palatable. I think Vance could have done much better at making sure people knew how radical Walz is, at least when it comes to literally how he ran Minnesota. I mean, he did it with the abortion topic, but he didn't talk about the violent crime in 2020 when he had way too many shots open about that. I mean, he brought up violent crime plenty, but he didn't target that. But still, I think Vance did enough of a job. I think most Americans who watch that, if there were any non-politically active or just kind of tuning in, I think a lot of them are going to look at this and be like, man, that dude looks like a president. Why is he on the VP? So I think you're looking, and I kind of said this, and I don't want to preemptively say anything. Obviously, there's a long way away. I already seen people kind of calling for it, but Vance 2028. The dude's got cojones. He's intelligent, and he's willing to push for the things that conservatives care about. Some of his positions have changed over the years, and that's very normal, but at least he's honest about it. And that's the thing that I think a lot of people are going to respect. He's honest about it. He doesn't try to lie about it. But yeah, do I think this is going to tip the election in favor of Trump, Vance? I don't know. I can't say. to me, I think it did enough to where you may see some of the swing states, you know, a point here and there that might tip towards Trump. But that's, again, meaning that everyone watched it. So I don't know. That's why I'm trying to be outspoken about it, try to show things that I can, speak on what I can, and yeah, get the message out there. But yeah, that's going to be it for this video, guys. I hope you all enjoyed. The debate was fantastic. That's something I could probably watch several times over and still enjoy myself. Again, probably the best debate performance I might ever see. Yeah, I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you all in the next one.